Mae Davis usually hummed a little tune as she walked, a habit she picked up from her grandma, who believed music could fix just about anything. Today, as she stepped through the grand gates of Graceland for the very first time as an employee, her hum died in her throat. The air here was different. It wasn't just the famous iron gates or the majestic white columns of the mansion staring back at her. It was something else, something bigger. She clutched the strap of her well-worn messenger bag, adjusting her glasses on her nose. She was 20, fresh out of community college, with a degree in hospitality. And this was her big break. A junior staff position at Graceland, the home of Elvis Presley, the king, felt less like a job and more like stepping into a legend. Her first stop was the main office building, a modern glass-fronted structure tucked away behind the mansion itself. Inside, the air conditioning was a welcome relief from the Memphis heat. A friendly receptionist pointed her towards Mr. Abernathy's office. Abernathy, her new supervisor, was apparently a Graceland institution, having been here for what felt like forever. "Ah, Miss Davis, come in, come in." Abernathy was a man in his late 50s with a tidy gray mustache and a perpetually tired but kind smile. He gestured to a chair across from his desk, which was piled high with folders and Elvis memorabilia. "Welcome to Graceland. We're glad to have you." Lily took a seat, trying to project competence and enthusiasm even though her stomach was doing a nervous little jig. "Thank you, Mr. Abernathy. I'm really excited to be here," he chuckled. "Everyone is at first. Give it a few months and you'll be just another cog in the machine." He winked, but his eyes were warm. "Just kidding, of course. Graceland has a way of getting under your skin. It's more than just a museum. It's home." He spent the next hour going over her duties, managing tour schedules, assisting with events, handling inquiries. It was all pretty standard stuff. As he spoke, Lily's gaze drifted around his office. There were framed photos of Elvis, of course, but also candid shots of staff parties, and even a couple of old-fashioned Polaroids of the mansion itself, looking a little faded. "Now," Lily Abernathy leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. "There's one thing you might hear about, something that some of the older staff talk about. Don't pay it too much mind. It's just old wives' tales, you understand." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Old wives' tales?" He nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Yes, people say, well, they say they hear Elvis singing in the halls at night." Lily blinked. She'd read some weird stuff online about Graceland, but she'd always dismissed it as tourist hype. A singing ghost sounded like something out of a bad horror movie. "Really?" she asked, trying to sound neutral. Abernathy gave a weary sigh. "Yep, been going on for years. Some staff swear by it. Others, like me, think it's just the wind, or old pipes, or maybe someone leaving a radio on. It's a very old house after all." He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't let it worry you. Your shifts will mostly be during the day. Occasionally, you might be asked to help with an evening event, but we're always here in groups. Right the wind, of course." But inside, a tiny spark of intrigue had ignited a singing ghost at Graceland. Even if it was just a rumor, it added a whole new layer to the legend. Her first day was a whirlwind. She met more staff, learned the layout of the tour path, and absorbed an incredible amount of Elvis trivia. She even got to peek into some of the famous rooms, the jungle room with its green shagged carpet and Polynesian decor, the vibrant TV room with its 3 televisions, the iconic living room. Every corner seemed to hum with history, with the echoes of laughter and music. As the afternoon wore on, the last of the tourists shuffled out, and the mansion grew quiet. Lily was helping Abernathy lock up one of the souvenir shops, humming that familiar, comforting tune her grandma loved. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. "All right, Lily, that's it for today," Abernathy said, jingling a set of keys. "You did great. See you tomorrow morning." "Thanks, Mr. Abernathy," she replied, heading towards the employee exit. The air was cooling, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak trees. As she walked across the grounds past the dark, silent mansion, something caught her ear. It was faint, barely there, like a whisper carried on the breeze, a melody Just a few notes, mournful and low, almost like a sigh. Lily stopped, straining to hear. The sound was gone. It must have been the wind, just as Abernathy said. Or maybe a car stereo passing by on Elvis Presley Boulevard. She shook her head, dismissing it. It was her first day, and her imagination was clearly working overtime. But as she reached her car, she paused, glancing back at the mansion. Its windows, dark and still, seemed to hold secrets, and for a fleeting moment she wondered, was it really just the wind? Or was the king still singing his lonely songs within the walls of his beloved Graceland? The thought sent a shiver not of fear but of strange excitement down her spine. This job was definitely going to be interesting. The next few days settled into a routine. Lily quickly learned the ropes guiding guests, answering questions about Elvis's favorite foods, peanut, butter, and banana sandwiches, naturally, and directing them through the various rooms. The mansion, even packed with tourists, held a certain stillness, a sense of preserved history. But in the quiet moments, especially as the crowds thinned in the late afternoon, Lily found herself listening. She still hadn't heard anything distinct since that first faint whisper. Abernathy was right. It was probably just her imagination, stirred up by the rumor, yet a part of her yearned for something more. She loved music, loved the stories behind it, and the idea of a lingering melody, a final encore from the king himself, was strangely beautiful. One Tuesday she was scheduled for a late shift, helping with a private event being held in the complex's exhibition hall. Most of the mansion itself would be closed, but a few staff members had to be on hand in case of any issues. The event wound down around 9 p.m., and Lily found herself among the last to leave the main building, walking back towards the office to clock out. The night was dark and still, a crescent moon hanging low in the sky. As she passed the mansion, a soft glow emanated from a few security lights, illuminating the famous front porch. She heard it then, not a whisper this time, but a clear, sustained note, a man's voice, deep and resonant, singing. Her heart gave a startled thump, but not from fear. It was more like awe. The sound was ethereal-like. It wasn't quite in the air, but of the air itself. It swelled, a melancholic hum that twisted into a familiar melody, a fragment of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Lily stopped dead in her tracks, clutching her messenger bag. She strained her ears, trying to pinpoint the source. It seemed to come from the mansion itself, perhaps from an upper window, or maybe the music room on the ground floor. The voice was unmistakable, that iconic vibrato, that unique blend of strength and vulnerability. It was Elvis. The song continued. Just a verse, then a chorus, sung with such tenderness that Lily felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't loud, not like a speaker, but it filled the quiet night with an almost palpable presence. Then, as suddenly as it began, it faded. The last note hung in the air for a moment, a beautiful lingering echo before dissolving into silence. Lily stood there for a long moment, the hair on her arms prickling. She wasn't scared. She felt a profound sense of privilege. This wasn't a spooky ghost trying to scare people. This was music. This was a soul, perhaps still expressing itself through the one language it knew best. "You heard it too, didn't you, dearie?" Lily nearly jumped out of her skin. An elderly cleaner, Mrs. Jenkins, stood a few feet away, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. Mrs. Jenkins was small, with kind eyes and a permanent smirk. She must have come out of the office building behind Lily. "Mrs. Jenkins," Lily stammered, her voice a little shaky. I did, was that?" Mrs. Jenkins chuckled, a dry, crackling sound. "King, yep, happens now and then, been happening for years. Most folks don't stick around long enough to hear it, or they pretend they didn't. Abernathy, bless his heart, he thinks it's a loose wire or a faulty speaker." She shook her head, still smirking. "Bless his skeptical heart," Lily whispered, still half disbelieving, half wondering if she was dreaming. Mrs. Jenkins shrugged, pushing her cart closer. "Who else could it be? Nobody else sings 'Can't Help Falling in Love' quite like that. especially not when there ain't no speakers on, and it's always different songs, different times, like he's just feeling it. She paused, her eyes softening as she looked at the mansion. Sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's sad, but it's always beautiful. It's why I don't mind the late shifts so much. Free concert. Lily stared at Mrs. Jenkins, then back at the mansion. Does it ever scare you? Nah, Mrs. Jenkins said, waving a hand dismissively. What's to be scared of? He was a gentle soul by all accounts. Just a bit lonely, maybe. I reckon he just misses singing for folks. And maybe, just maybe, he's still got something to say. Mrs. Jenkins continued, pushing her cart, disappearing. Lily remained looking up at the mansion. The silence had returned, but it felt different now. Not empty, but filled with possibility. Still got something to say. Lily repeated softly, the words accenting her mind. This wasn't just a random haunting. It felt like something with a purpose, a beautiful musical purpose. And suddenly Lily knew she couldn't just dismiss it as wind or old pipes. She had to understand. She had to listen. Lily arrived at Graceland the next morning, feeling like she'd stepped into a secret club. Knowing about the singing and having confirmed it with Mrs. Jenkins made everything feel more alive, more mysterious. She found herself looking at the mansion with new eyes, not just as a historical landmark, but as a place where music still lingered. A personal stage for a legendary voice. During her break, she found Mrs. Jenkins in the staff lounge, sipping coffee. Mrs. Jenkins, Lily began, pulling up a chair. Can you tell me more about the singing? Mrs. Jenkins smiled, her eyes twinkling. Oh, you're one of the curious ones, are you? Good. It's a shame most young folks these days are too busy with their phones to listen to the real magic. She explained that the singing had been reported for decades, ever since Elvis's death. Different staff members, different security guards, different tour guides. Some heard it clearly, others just a faint hum. It wasn't always the same song, or even the same type of song. Sometimes it was a gospel tune, sometimes a ballad, sometimes a rockabilly riff. But it's mostly at night? Lily asked. Mostly, Mrs. Jenkins confirmed. When the house is quiet, when it can breathe, I suppose. Less noise to compete with. She took another sip of coffee. Some folks say he's lonely. Others say he's just practicing. My grandma, bless her soul, she used to say that music never truly dies. It just finds new ways to be heard. Lily thought about this. Do you think there's a pattern to it, like specific rooms or times? Mrs. Jenkins hummed thoughtfully. Well, it seems to drift. Sometimes it's strong from the music room. Other times it sounds like it's coming from the stairway. Once, I swear, I heard a full gospel choir sound coming from the TV room, but that was probably just my imagination. One thing I've noticed, it tends to be reflective songs, songs about love, lost dreams. Not so many of the high-energy rock and roll hits, surprisingly. This was exactly what Lily needed to hear. A starting point. If the songs were reflective, maybe they carried a deeper meaning. She decided to keep a mental log, to note down whenever she heard something, what song it might be, and where it seemed to come from. She would investigate discreetly. Of course, she didn't want to seem unprofessional or like she was chasing ghosts. That night, Lily volunteered for an extra late shift to help organize some archive material in the administrative building. It meant she'd be one of the very last people on the property. As the hours ticked by, the office complex grew eerily quiet. Around midnight, after she'd put away the last of the files, she decided to take a slow walk back to her car, past the mansion. The air was cool, the moon high. The mansion stood, dark and imposing, but for a faint glow from the security lights around its perimeter, Lily walked slowly, her senses heightened. She wasn't afraid. There was a sense of anticipation building inside her, a feeling that she was on the verge of uncovering something truly special. She was passing the side of the house near where the music room was. when it started, faintly at first, then growing clearer. It wasn't a full song, but a series of notes, a melodic progression, a humming, and then a whisper of lyrics. It sounded like a work in progress, a song being pieced together. This time it wasn't a familiar Elvis hit. It was new, yet undeniably his voice. The notes were tender, soaring, filled with a yearning quality. It was a beautiful, unfinished melody, almost as if he was composing it right there. Right then Lily froze, her breath catching in her throat. She closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. It wasn't just coming from a single spot. It felt like it was woven into the very fabric of the house, vibrating through the walls, through the ground beneath her feet. It was pure emotion, pure music. As the melodic fragment faded into silence, Lily felt tears prick at her eyes. This wasn't just a ghost, this was a lingering echo of creativity. A soul still singing its truth. It felt incredibly intimate, like being let in on a private moment. She spent the rest of her walk back to her car replaying the melody in her mind, trying to capture it. It was too complex, too ethereal to fully grasp. But she knew one thing for sure. It wasn't just a random haunting. There was a deep well of emotion behind these sounds. "He's still got something to say," Mrs. Jenkins' words echoed in her memory. Lily now believed it with all her heart, and she felt an overwhelming desire to understand what that something was. What unfinished business, what untold story was Elvis still trying to sing from the heart of his beloved Graceland? The answers, she felt, were hidden in the melodies. Over the next few weeks, Lily's fascination with the singing deepened into a quiet obsession. She dedicated her breaks and quiet moments to poring over Elvis's biography, interviews, and even song lyrics. She wanted to understand the man behind the voice, to see if there was a connection between his life and the phantom melodies she heard. She made a conscious effort to stay late whenever possible, offering to help with inventory or closing duties. Abernathy, always appreciative of a diligent worker, never suspected her true motive. Lily's notebook, once meant for tour notes, became a secret journal for her strange discoveries. She jotted down dates, times, perceived locations, and snippets of melodies or lyrics she managed to catch. She noticed a definite pattern emerging. The singing rarely happened when there were many people around. It preferred the quiet intimacy of the late hours. Often, after midnight, it seemed to come most frequently from the music room, the grand staircase, and sometimes the upstairs hallway areas that were deeply personal to Elvis. But the most intriguing pattern was in the songs themselves. As Mrs. Jenkins had suggested, they weren't the upbeat rock anthems. Instead, they were often soulful ballads, gospel hymns, or, most intriguingly, fragments of what sounded like unreleased or unfinished songs. Sometimes, the same melodic phrase would repeat over several nights, almost like a musician trying to perfect a difficult passage. One night, as Lily was tidying up the gift shop, she heard a distinct, melancholic tune coming from the mansion. It was, "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" But it wasn't just sung. It felt imbued with an intense sadness she'd never fully appreciated in the recorded version. It was raw, vulnerable, almost like a direct plea. Lily murmured to herself, thinking about Elvis's struggles with fame and privacy. The song felt like a window into his deepest emotions. Another time she heard a gospel hymn, "Peace in the Valley," sung with such profound reverence and hope that it brought tears to her eyes. This seemed to emanate from the living room near the grand piano. It reminded her that Elvis's spiritual side was just as important as his rock and roll persona. But the most captivating moments were when she heard those unidentifiable melodies. They were usually fragments, sometimes a few bars of a piano melody, other times a haunting vocal line without words. These weren't songs anyone would recognize from an album. They were like glimpses into his creative process, or perhaps thoughts he never fully articulated during his lifetime. Lily started researching old Elvis, session notes, outtakes, unreleased recordings. She spent hours online, delving into fan forums and obscure archives, trying to match any of the phantom melodies to something tangible. So far, nothing. The melodies she heard were uniquely ethereal, untouched by recording equipment or human hands. One evening, after the mansion had been thoroughly cleaned and secured, Lily lingered. She felt a strong pull towards the music room. The air felt heavy, expectant. She stood in the doorway gazing at the piano, the instruments. It was almost as if she could feel a presence there, waiting. And then it began. Not a song, but a sustained, rich. It built almost like a chord, and then resolved into a short, incredibly beautiful piano phrase. It was familiar, yet completely unknown. A melody that seemed to be searching for words. It was incredibly complex, yet simple in its emotional honesty. It spoke of yearning, of something left unsaid, or perhaps something never fully realized. It was the same fragment she had heard before, but clearer, more sustained this time. Like a puzzle piece fitting into place, she opened her eyes, gazing at the silent piano. It was as if Elvis was right there, trying to compose, trying to finish something. And in that moment, a powerful intuition struck her. This wasn't just random singing, this wasn't just a ghost reliving old glories. This was an ongoing creative process, a lingering fragment of a brilliant mind still trying to express itself. The melodies were a language, and Lily was starting to understand its grammar. They weren't just echoes, they were messages. Messages of his innermost thoughts, his unfulfilled artistic desires, perhaps even a final unheard song. She felt a deep responsibility to listen to, truly hear what the king was trying to say. Lily's days at Graceland transformed. What was once just a job was now a quest. Every quiet moment was an opportunity to listen, every late shift a chance for a new discovery. She developed a unique sensitivity to the subtle shifts in the mansion's atmosphere. She learned to discern the difference between creaking floorboards and the true otherworldly notes of the singing. She noticed that the unidentifiable melodies, the ones that sounded like unfinished compositions, seemed to be the most persistent. They were often accompanied by the faint shimmering sound of a piano, a guitar, or even a bass line, always just beyond the edge of tangible reality. It was as if an entire ethereal band was playing with Elvis's voice at its heart. One evening, Lily was in the gift shop preparing to close. The last tourists had left an hour ago. And the silence of the grounds was profound. Lyrics, clear, new lyrics. And they were about Graceland, about a dream. About a silent song. Her heart pounded. This was it. This was more than just an echo. This was a message. She grabbed her phone instinctively, wanting to record it, but then hesitated. Could she? Would it work? And was it right to try and capture something so profoundly personal? She decided to just listen, to commit every word, every note to memory. The voice continued, filled with a poignant beauty, a melody born but never quite true, waiting for a heart to see it through. In the hallowed halls, where echoes reside, the song was raw, vulnerable, a direct expression of his spirit. It felt like a confession, a longing for someone to understand. The melody intertwined with the lyrics, creating a sense of deep personal revelation. It was unmistakably Elvis, but an Elvis she'd never heard before. Not the performer, but the man, the artist, revealing his innermost self. The singing continued for another verse, hinting at a desire for his music to live on, to touch hearts in a way that went beyond fame and fortune. Then, just as before, it faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier, more meaningful than before. Lily stood there, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't sad tears, but tears of profound understanding and empathy. This wasn't a spooky haunting, this was a gift. Elvis wasn't trapped. He was trying to connect, to share something unfinished, something important. The silent song was the key. The next day, she found herself walking through the mansion with a different kind of purpose. She looked at the artifacts, the gold records, the jumpsuits, not just as relics of a superstar, but as pieces of a puzzle. What was the silent song? Was it a physical song, lost to time? Or was it something deeper? A metaphorical message about his legacy, his true artistic desires. She spent hours in the research room poring over obscure documents, old interviews and fan theories. She discovered that Elvis had, throughout his life, often expressed a desire for more creative control, to write more, to explore different musical avenues beyond what his managers wanted. He had dabbled in songwriting even if he wasn't credited for many of his hits. Was this silent song one of his own compositions? One he never got to finish or share with the world? Lily felt a growing sense of responsibility. If this was indeed a cry from the heart of an artist, a masterpiece left incomplete, then it needed to be heard. It needed to be understood. She thought about the melody born, but never quite true. It hinted at a fragment, a half-formed idea that haunted him even in death. This wasn't just a ghost singing old hits. It was an artist, working, creating, communicating. The mystery was no longer about proving the ghost existed. It was about deciphering its message. Lily felt a profound connection to this ethereal presence, a bond forged through shared love of music and a deep respect for Elvis's legacy. She knew with unwavering certainty that she had to find a way to help him finish his symphony. The new lyrics. Lily heard a melody born, but never quite true. Waiting for a heart to see it through became her guiding light. She now understood that the singing wasn't random. It was focused on a specific, unfulfilled purpose. Core of the mystery wasn't about if Elvis was singing, but what he was trying to say with these unreleased tunes. Her research intensified. She looked for anything related to unrecorded songs, personal compositions, or musical ideas Elvis might have sketched out. She scoured the internet, old fan club newsletters, and even checked library archives in Memphis for anything about Elvis's personal musical projects, beyond his studio work. Graceland archives were immense, but much of it was performance-related. What she needed was something private. She spent more nights at Graceland, always volunteering for tasks that would keep her on the property after hours. She became an expert at moving quietly through the mansion, feeling the energy of each room. She noticed that the distinct, unfinished melodies she'd heard before, the one that sounded like a piano piece, seemed strongest in the blue room, the living room with its famous grand piano. One particularly quiet Tuesday night, Lily was on security rounds. Checking doors and windows, she deliberately lingered in the mansion. The air was still and warm, carrying the scent of old wood and history. She entered the living room, drawn by an almost magnetic pull. The moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows. She walked towards the grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the faint light. As she stood there, a profound sense of sadness washed over her, followed by a familiar, yet deeper, surge of musical energy. Then it started the piano, not with a bang or a dramatic chord, but with a delicate, hesitant melody, played as if by unseen fingers. It was the unfinished symphony from her notes, clearer and more complete than she had ever heard it. It was a bluesy, soulful ballad with a touch of gospel, incredibly beautiful and complex. As the piano melody continued, Elvis's voice joined in, not singing words, but humming, a deep, resonant hum that expressed pure emotion, longing, regret, hope, and an almost unbearable tenderness. He was sketching out the vocal line over the piano, trying different inflections, perfecting the phrasing. It was like witnessing a live recording session, except the artist was a ghost. Lily closed her eyes, letting the music envelop her. It was a song of quiet beauty, a reflection of a soul that had seen much, felt much, and yearned for peace. She could almost picture him sitting there, his fingers hovering over the keys, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then the humming changed, became clearer, and a few distinct words emerged. Sung with a fragile where my heart would confide, secrets held close, nowhere to hide. A melody whispered, a truth left untold, a story of love worth more than pure gold. Lily's breath hitched. This blue room, it was referring to the very room she was in, and a truth left untold, a story of love. This was not just a song, It was an autobiography in music, testament to a love perhaps unrequited or lost or simply private. The music swelled, the phantom piano and voice creating a symphony of emotion. It was powerful, heartbreaking, and undeniably real. It lasted longer than any previous singing, a full minute or two before slowly fading, the final piano note echoing. Lily opened her eyes, tears blurring her vision. The room was still, the piano silent, but the melody, the lyrics resonated within her. This Blue Room Ballad, as she now mentally christened it, was the core of his message. It was a personal truth, a declaration of love and a plea for it to be heard. But whose love and what truth? The lyrics were vague enough to be universal, but specific enough to feel deeply personal to Elvis. Lily felt a surge of determination. This was the silent song. This was what he was trying to finish. And she, Lily Davis, was the one who was meant to hear it, to understand it, and somehow to help him finally share it. The next step, she realized, was to share her discovery. But who would believe her? There was only one person she could truly trust with this profound secret. Abernathy. Lily knew that telling Abernathy about the singing in the new lyrics was a huge risk. He was a kind man, but deeply practical, and initially dismissive of the ghost stories. How could she convince him of something so extraordinary? Yet she couldn't carry this burden, this beautiful secret alone. The Blue Room Ballad felt too important, too real to keep to herself. She decided to approach him carefully, armed with the patterns she'd observed and the lyrics she'd memorized. The next morning she asked if he had a moment to talk, her voice trying to sound casual but her heart thumping. Abernathy leaned back in his chair, gesturing for her to sit. "What's on your mind, Lily? Everything all right?" "Yes, sir, everything's fine," she began, taking a deep breath. "Just about the singing, the one you mentioned on my first day." Abernathy sighed, a familiar weariness in his eyes. "Ah, that's still hearing things, are we? I told you it's probably just the old buildings settling, or maybe some pranksters." "No, Mr. Abernathy, it's not," Lily said, her voice firm. "It's different. I've been listening. It's not random. It's him. And he's singing things I've never heard before. Unfinished songs, new lyrics." She could see his skepticism hardening, his lips thinning. "Lily, I appreciate your enthusiasm for the job, but we're here to manage a historical site, not chase phantoms. I understand the romantic idea, but it's not practical." "But it's not romantic, sir. It's real," Lily insisted, leaning forward. "And it's specific. It often comes from the music room or the living room, and it's almost always reflective songs, or, lately, what sound like fragments of something unreleased. Last night, I heard clear lyrics about the Blue Room, about a truth untold, a story of love." She recited the lyrics she'd heard, her voice quiet, but filled with conviction. Abernathy listened, his expression slowly shifting from skepticism to a puzzled frown. He tapped his pen against his desk, his gaze distant. "A Blue Room Ballad, you say?" he murmured, almost to himself. He had been at Graceland for decades. He knew the house intimately. "Yes," Lily affirmed, "and it feels like he's trying to tell us something, finish something." Abernathy leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Lily, I've heard every story under the sun. Security guards swearing they've seen him, tourists claiming they heard him whisper. It's always been dismissed as an overactive imagination, a trick of the light, or wishful thinking. What if it's more than that? What if it's a piece of his art, left behind, trying to find its way out?" He looked at her truly, looked at her, and saw not a naive young employee, but someone genuinely earnest and deeply affected. His hard-nosed practicality seemed to soften just a fraction. "All right, Lily," he said, a slow, hesitant breath. "Let's say for a moment I entertain the possibility. What do you propose we do? Set up a recording studio in the living room. Call a seance. His tone was still laced with irony, but there was a hint of curiosity. "No," Lily said, a small spark of hope igniting. "Not yet, but could we just listen? Maybe you could stay late with me one night just to see. Maybe the presence feels stronger when someone is truly listening, truly open to it." Abernathy considered this a long silence stretching between them. He thought of Mrs. Jenkins, whose quiet belief he'd always indulged as harmless eccentricity. He thought of his own decades. At Graceland, the occasional unexplainable chill, the faint distant sounds, he'd always rationalized away. Finally, he let out a long sigh. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, Miss Davis. Or maybe a little of both. Fine tomorrow night. I'll stay late, but we go in S. Just 2 staff members checking the premises. And if we hear nothing, we never speak of this again. Understood?" "Understood." Lily's heart soared. It was a chance, a slim one, but a chance nonetheless. She knew that if anyone could hear it, it would be Abernathy. He knew Elvis's voice better than anyone. If he heard what she heard, everything would change. The following evening felt charged with anticipation. Lily and Abernathy finished their duties, the usual closing routine, but with an underlying tension. As the last security guard locked up the gates for the night, leaving them as the sole occupants of the entire Graceland property, the silence of the mansion seemed to deepen. "All right, Lily," Abernathy said, his voice lower than usual. "Where do you suggest we listen?" He still sounded skeptical, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, curiosity, perhaps even a hint of nervous excitement. "The blue room," Lily replied, her voice hushed. "The living room. That's where the most distinct fragment of the unfinished song came from last night." They walked through the quiet halls, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. Lily felt a strange mixture of apprehension and hope. What if it didn't happen? What if under the pressure of Abernathy's presence, the singing remained silent? They entered the famous living room. Moonlight streamed through the tall windows, casting an almost mystical glow on the piano, the iconic white sofa, and the vibrant peacock-stained glass. The air in the room felt different, almost thick with a lingering presence. Abernathy walked over to the piano, touching the keys gently. He spent hours here, he mused, just playing, experimenting. Never for the public, just for himself or for a few close friends. Lily nodded, a shiver running down her spine. "I think he's still doing that, still experimenting, trying to finish something." They sat down on the comfortable sofa facing the piano and waited. Minutes stretched into what felt like an hour. The only sounds were the distant hum of the ventilation system and the soft creaks of the old house. Abernathy fidgeted slightly, glancing at his watch. Lily held her breath, willing the music to come. Just as Abernathy opened his mouth, perhaps to suggest they call it a night, it began faintly at first, then growing stronger. The ethereal piano melody started. It was the Blue Room Ballad, the same poignant tune Lily had heard before. But this time, it was clearer, more resonant, as if the notes were truly being played in the room. Abernathy stiffened, his eyes wide. He looked at Lily, then back at the piano, his jaw slightly agape. The music was undeniable. Then the voice, Elvis's voice. "For a Memphis belle, with eyes bright and keen, a promise unspoken, a bittersweet scene. Through changing seasons my spirit still yearns for a love's true echo." The last 2 lines, "For a Memphis belle with eyes bright and keen, a promise unspoken, a bittersweet scene," were entirely new to Lily. And they changed everything. "A promise unspoken," Abernathy gasped. A quiet, almost reverent sound. His eyes were no longer skeptical, but filled with an almost bewildered awe. He looked at Lily, then back at the unseen source of the music. The song, the piano, the voice faded, leaving an almost painful silence in its wake. That's not on any record," Abernathy whispered, his voice hoarse. "Those words, a Memphis belle, a promise unspoken." He closed his eyes, shaking his head slightly. He had a sweetheart here before Priscilla, before the fame really took hold. Dixie Locke. She was from Memphis, and he was very much in love with her. Lily's mind raced. Dixie Locke. A forgotten love, perhaps, overshadowed by his later, more famous relationships. A promise unspoken. Could it be a song written for her, a final expression of a love that never fully blossomed? Abernathy opened his eyes, looking at Lily with a gaze that had completely shedded skepticism. "Lily," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "You were right. It's not just a ghost. He's singing his heart out. He's telling us a story." The realization settled over Lily like a warm blanket. It wasn't just a general, mournful presence. It was a specific, heartfelt message, a love song, an unheard truth waiting to be discovered and understood. And now Abernathy had heard it too. The shared experience forged a powerful connection between them. The real work, the work of honoring this profound legacy, could finally begin. The morning after their shared experience, Abernathy was a changed man. Tired kindness in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet, thoughtful intensity. He believed Lily now, not just intellectually but with the profound conviction that comes from witnessing the impossible. The Blue Room Ballad and its personal lyrics had shattered his skepticism. "Dixie Locke," Abernathy repeated over coffee in his office, paging through an old Graceland photo album. She was a truly sweet girl. She decided not to follow him to Hollywood, wanted a normal life. They remained friends, but I think a part of him always held a special place for her. A promise unspoken, indeed. So the song, it's a tribute to her, a love he never fully expressed, Lily mused. Abernathy nodded. Sounds like it. A private piece of his heart left here in his home trying to finally be heard. He looked up, his gaze meeting Lily's. "So, Lily, what do we do?" "We can't exactly announce that Elvis's ghost is singing unreleased love songs." "No," Lily agreed, a small smile touching her lips. "Not like that. But we can honor it. We can acknowledge it. This isn't a haunting, Mr. Abernathy. It's a lingering message of love and art. It's beautiful." They spent hours brainstorming. They couldn't record the ethereal singing, as it seemed to exist on a plane beyond technology. Couldn't put up a sign saying, "Listen for the ghost of Elvis," not without turning Graceland into a sideshow. They could subtly weave the essence of the discovery into the Graceland experience. "What if we create a special exhibit?" Lily suggested. "Something about Elvis's personal life, his private moments, his unfulfilled creative dreams. We could include photos of Dixie Locke, talk about his early loves, his desire to write more songs, even old journals that speak to his introspective side. We could call it The Heart of Graceland, Elvis. The artist unveiled. We wouldn't say the songs are ghostly, but we could hint at his lingering presence and his unfinished melodies." They began to formulate a plan. They would delve deeper into the archives looking for any other notes, lyrical fragments, or musical sketches that might correspond with the ethereal tunes Lily had heard. They would consult with the Graceland curatorial team, carefully framing their proposal, emphasizing the unveiling of a deeper, more personal Elvis, rather than focusing on the supernatural. Abernathy, with his decades of experience in standing, would champion the idea. Lily would be his research assistant, providing the inspiration for the exhibit without revealing a full, incredible truth to everyone. It would be their shared secret, a sacred trust. They decided to also propose a special evening tour that focused on the quiet, contemplative side of Graceland. No loud music, no flashing lights. Lily envisioned just the atmosphere. We could play some of his quieter songs, tell stories about his life here, maybe even talk about how music lingers in these old houses. It would create the perfect environment for visitors to feel the presence, even if they didn't hear it as they worked. Lily felt a profound sense of purpose. This wasn't just a job anymore, it was a mission. She was helping his legacy be understood in a deeper, more personal way than ever before. That night, as Lily walked out of Graceland, the mansion seemed to hum with a different kind of energy. It wasn't a sad, searching melody this time, but a quiet, almost contented harmony. She still heard the faint echo of a piano, a soulful hum, but it felt less like a desperate plea and more like a gentle whisper of gratitude. The Blue Room Ballad seemed to resonate differently, too. It was still tender, still poignant, but it carried a sense of hope, as if the love it spoke of was finally being acknowledged. Lily smiled. She imagined Elvis somewhere beyond the veil, finally finding peace, knowing his silent song was on its way to being heard, his untold truth unveiled. Months turned into a blur of dedicated work. Lily and Abernathy poured their hearts into the heart of Graceland. Elvis, the Artist Unveiled exhibit. They unearthed old photographs of Dixie Locke, discovered a small forgotten notebook with poetic musings in Elvis's handwriting that resonated with the ballad's themes, and compiled rare audio clips of him discussing his personal songwriting ambitions. The Graceland team, intrigued by Abernathy's passion and Lily's meticulous research, embraced the project. The exhibit opened to rave reviews. Visitors were touched by the deeply personal glimpse into Elvis's life, seeing him not just as a rock and roll legend, but as a sensitive, introspective artist with a yearning heart. The atmosphere in the Blue Room, especially where the exhibit focused on his early life and loves, felt particularly potent. Many visitors commented on a profound sense of peace and a gentle energy in that specific space. The Blue Room Ballad was never explicitly revealed as a ghostly composition, but Abernathy and Lily wove its essence into the exhibit's narrative. They spoke of unexpressed melodies, lingering affections, and the songs of his soul that only Graceland truly knew. It allowed visitors to connect with the deeper, more emotional side of Elvis, while leaving room for personal interpretation of the presence they might feel. As for the singing, it gradually changed. Lily still stayed late occasionally, and Abernathy, now a firm believer, sometimes joined her. The haunting, searching quality in Elvis's voice seemed to dissipate. The unfinished melodies became less frequent, replaced by full, beautiful, and distinctively peaceful songs. Sometimes it was a tender, "Love Me Tender." Other times a soaring gospel hymn, but always imbued with a serene, almost contented feeling. It was no longer a plea, but a lullaby. No longer a search, but a quiet celebration. The Blue Room Ballad played occasionally, now feeling complete, its message of love finally heard and understood. One evening, Lily and Abernathy sat in the quiet living room. After the exhibit had closed, the moonlight bathed the piano in a soft glow. A faint, harmonious melody filled the air, a gentle, wordless hum that felt like a peaceful sigh. It was full, rich, and comforting. He's at peace, isn't he? L'Emotion. I think so, Lily. I think that song, that story, finally being acknowledged, it's given him a measure of peace, or perhaps it's helped us understand the peace he always sought. The singing didn't vanish entirely. It became an intrinsic part of Graceland's soul, a comforting hum in the quiet moments, a gentle echo of the profound musical spirit that lived there. It was less a ghost and more a guardian, a lasting presence that reminded everyone that music truly never dies, and that love, even unspoken, can resonate through time. Lily, no longer just a junior staff member, found her true calling at Graceland. She became an unofficial historian of Elvis's personal legacy, guiding special tours, sharing stories that only a few truly understood. She often caught a glimpse of Mrs. Jenkins, who would offer a knowing wink and a silent nod, acknowledging the magic they shared. Graceland itself seemed to breathe easier. The mansion, once just a museum, felt more like a beloved home, vibrant with the lingering presence of its most famous resident. The staff still sometimes heard the faint melodies, but now, instead of whispers of ghosts, they spoke of Elvis's song, a beloved part of the Graceland experience. Lily would sometimes find herself humming the Blue Room Ballad, a tune only a handful of living souls truly knew. It was her secret, her connection to the king, and a reminder that even in the quietest corners of history, if you listen closely enough, the most beautiful melodies and the most profound truths can still be found. The ghosts of Graceland weren't scary. They were singing love songs, and in listening, Lily had found her own harmony.